Einar Tangen, who's joining us from Beijing, and I know it's late there. Mr. Tangen, the Chinese seem to be virtually endorsing what Vladimir Putin has done, suggesting that there were security reasons why he's done it. Is that the general sense that you get, that China intends to back Russia in its invasion of Ukraine?
No, that's not the general sense. What China's position is that this is like when the saying goes, when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. In this particular case, the grass is Ukraine. This is a geopolitical contest between Russia and the United States and its allies over NATO expanding into the previous Soviet bloc. And that, unfortunately, it's, as I said, the Ukrainian people are suffering. So China understands that, but they do not endorse any kind of intervention within a country. That is a longstanding principle that Beijing has stuck to. It's one of the things that they repeat time after time when there are questions about internal policies. So that's not the issue. But you know, I don't think everyone here in Beijing, I think, is well aware that this is an armed incursion. And that Putin has basically said he's given up on getting security assurances satisfactory to him that Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO. And he's, in essence, looking to create a buffer country. Looks like a partition, an eastern and western Ukraine.
But is Russia going to support Russia? But is China
Dnieper River as the boundary?
But Mr. Tangen, is China going to support Russia in the United Nations Security Council? Is China going to support the Russians globally? Are we seeing, as has been suggested, China using this to even get closer to Russia?
No, I don't think it's a question of trying to get closer to Russia. Russia has really no other place to go. They've played their card. Obviously, the U.S. and Europe are not going to be too friendly from now on. And Russia is going to have to turn a lot of its sales, of its energy, back toward the east, not necessarily all China. You know, obviously Korea, Japan. There are already other markets that are out there. But, you know, at this juncture, China is in a situation where this is very unsettling. China has been trying to promote trade agreements, RCEP, Belt and Road, even joining the CPTPP. And they were hoping for trade. They're concerned about a global recession. This kind of conflict is sure to push the world into a very deep recession. This is not going to be a short-lived event, and it's going to have massive economic repercussions, not only for China, but also the developing world.
Let me take that to you, Mr. Bond. Do you see this as Mr. Tangen suggests, some kind of an escalating conflict that will be prolonged? Or do you go by the view that this is going to be a short and swift operation? That's what Vladimir Putin is banking on.
Well, it's clearly what he's hoping for. But no, I tend to agree that this could be quite prolonged. Not just because the Ukrainian army is a lot better than it was in 2014, when the Russians really faced almost no opposition. But because Putin has actually consolidated Ukraine as a country over the last 8 years. You know, there's a popular misconception in many places that Ukraine is somehow a deeply divided country with, you know, a Russian-speaking East that would rather be with Moscow and a Ukrainian-speaking West that would rather be with the West. But actually, opinion polling has shown that across the whole country, people want to be part of Western institutions. They don't want to be drawn back into the Russian Empire. They tried that before, and it worked out very badly for them. So I think we are in for a prolonged conflict, and I don't imagine that even after the military phase ends, if Putin is victorious, that we will see Ukraine become a peaceful unit of the Russian Empire. I don't think it will be. I think it will take a lot of effort from Russia to keep it suppressed.
So what really then do you expect to happen over the next week, from the European perspective, Mr. Bond? Do you expect Europe to go beyond sanctions at all? Can there be any attempt made by NATO to put any kind of pressure on Russia?
I mean, if you're talking about NATO as an organization, the Secretary General made very clear this morning that NATO is not going to put troops on the ground in Ukraine, but it is going to reinforce the eastern parts of NATO. And I think that's extremely necessary, because I think one cannot predict exactly what is going to happen when and if Russian troops begin to approach those borders. But in terms of individual member states who have already been offering military support to Ukraine, I mean military equipment to Ukraine, I would expect that would carry on. I mean, Ukraine is a sovereign state. It's a member of the United Nations. It has the right under the United Nations Charter to individual and collective self-defense. And if Ukraine asks its allies and partners for assistance, then I would imagine that at least some Western countries will want to help it. And so they should. This is democracy on the line. You know, this is democracy threatened by autocracy.
A final word, Dr. Hamilton. Democracy threatened by autocracy. What do you expect the US now to do? We are told that the G7 meeting has taken place. What can we expect from President Biden?
Well, I agree, democracy versus autocracy. I have to really object vehemently to comment made earlier that somehow this is about NATO enlargement. You know, that's a pretext. That's not even on the table. That NATO has no intention to bring in Ukraine in any realistic time frame. You know, the principle of keeping NATO's door open is going to stay open. But there has never been a debate in any recent time about Ukraine joining NATO. So this is a camouflage. This is Putin diverting everyone's attention from the real issue, which was he cannot tolerate an independent Ukraine, because a successful, prosperous, democratic Ukraine would resonate heavily throughout Russia. And it would provide an alternative Slavic success to the regime he has built in Russia. That is, in his mind, a direct threat. It's not about NATO. Remember, the first time he invaded in 2014, it was because the European Union signed a trade agreement with Ukraine. And then he rolled in the troops. It had nothing to do with NATO then either. It was about a trade agreement. How can that be a threat to him? It's not about these things. It is about his unwillingness to tolerate an independent country. So we have to respond to this, and that's why it's bigger than Ukraine, because it's a pretext for operations that could happen elsewhere.
I think that's a warning.
So you should expect today from the president and from many Western leaders, and we hope from countries around the world, a severe package of sanctions that will pulverize the Russian economy and isolate Russia in very extreme ways from being able to interact with lots of other countries. I think China is in a bind now. It doesn't really want to support the idea that you can use separatist regions as a pretext for military intervention. Think about China's own challenges about separatism and the conflicts. It's not a clear-cut issue for China. I think China has to, straddle the line here and has been intentionally vague exactly where it stands.
As you said,
and that's